Assalamu alaikum, Onihaseyo, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It's a privilege to welcome you on behalf of Dr. Muhammad Abdullah Ali, CEO of Trends Group. We convened at the time of a profound geopolitical uncertainty as the ongoing war in the Middle East continues to carry significant regional and global implications. Today's panel, War in the Middle East, How South Korea Sees the Crisis, in collab with Institute for National Security Strategy, provides an important opportunity to examine these developments through discussion and influence international perspectives. As a major economic power and responsible global stakeholder, South Korea is carefully navigate a complex strategy environments. Its approach reflects a balance between diplomatic engagement, security consideration, and safeguard of economic interest. Today's discussion will be address three key dimensions: international relations, including Seoul diplomatic positioning aimed at evolving global dynamics; security, particularly the broader implication for regional and international stability; economic and energy consideration, with focusing on supply chain and energy security. At Trends, we underscore the importance of inclusive dialogue and diverse perspective in understanding global challenges and informing policy response. We extend our sincere appreciation to our distinguished panelists for their valuable engagement. Now I'm going to handle the mic to Mariam Al-Janebi, my colleague. Please, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Abdullah. Good morning, everyone. It is my pleasure to welcome you all again to today's strategic dialogue titled The War in the Middle East, How South Korea Sees the Crisis. My name is Mariam Al-Janebi, and I will be moderating today's session. So to start, the developments we are witnessing in the Middle East are not only reshaping regional dynamics, but they are also influencing how global actors interpret risk, stability, and strategic positioning. For countries such as South Korea, with deep economic ties to the region and strong reliance on Middle Eastern energy resources, these developments are not distant events, but they are factors that directly inform policy, planning, and long-term strategic thinking. Today's session brings together perspectives from the Institute for National Security Strategy and Trends Research and Advisory to explore how Seoul is interpreting the current moment and what this may signal for regional and global stability moving forward. With that, let me open the conversation. I'd like to start with Dr. Lee Song-hoon, Director of Security Strategy Studies at the Institute of National Security Strategy, whose work focuses on international security and strategy affairs. Dr. Lee, if we look at this moment strategically, it seems that what's unfolding in the Middle East is not only a regional crisis, but a test of how global actors interpret risk and reposition themselves. How is this moment being interpreted in Seoul? Dr. Lee?
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Okay. I would like to begin my thinking and briefly share the key points from now on. I'm sorry to say to this, for the sake of the precise and the clarity of the communication each other, I would like to, I will proceed in Korean. I appreciate your understanding. Okay. 첫 번째, 그 중동전을 바라보는 그 국제 정치적 함의는 한국이 보는 국제 정치적 함의는 약 5가지 정도로 요약 가능하겠습니다. 해도 돼?
I could briefly summarize how Korea perceives the Middle East war in 5 points.
첫 번째는 동맹국가의 협의가 없는 일방적인 이런 미국의 군사작전으로 인해서 향후 미국의 리더십 및 그 신뢰가 국제사회로부터 훼손이 많이 되었다는 점을 들 수가 있고요. 두 번째는 규범 기반의 질서와 그다음에 질서의 해체와 그 힘의 논리, 강대국 논리의 부활은 그 향후에 다극적 혼돈의 시대로 진입할 것이라는 전망을 낳게 합니다.
The first point is that this Middle East war has let a great blow on the U.S. leadership and its credibility in the world. And because the U.S. military operations were proceeded without the agreement among alliances, this very act has weakened U.S.'s global leadership, and also the U.S. as a key partner of the Korean alliance. We see that we have challenges to face in trying to increase strategic autonomy after this war. The second point is that we believe that we have entered an age of chaos because we have seen a resurrection of the power of the U.S. and also because of this war, we have seen that the norms-based world order no longer holds up. So this is also a very grave challenge to future Korean diplomacy.
세 번째 포인트는 그 서구 동맹, 특히 나토와 미국 간의 그러한 동맹에 대한 그러한 균열의 위험, 특히 트럼프 대통령의 나토 탈퇴의 그러한 언급이라든지 나토 동맹국들의 미국의 군사 요구에 대한 그러한 부정적인 반응 등에 대한 부분에 있어서는 동맹 체제의 어떠한 틈새를 좀 볼 수 있다는 부분이 한 가지 있고요. 그다음 네 번째로는 이러한 중동전을 계기로 해서 핵 비확산 체제의 그러한 균열, 그 다음에 군사적으로 봤을 경우에 AI의 그러한 전쟁 주체로서의 부상, 그 다음에 샤헤드 드론과 같은 값싼 무기의 전쟁 수단의 일상화 등이 군사적 관점에서의 교훈으로 볼 수가 있겠습니다.
Okay, the third point is that we have seen a rupture between NATO and US alliance through this war, and we can see some gaps in the alliance system throughout all over the world. Especially President Trump's mention of withdrawing from the NATO, or we can see it from negative reactions of NATO allies to US military demands. The fourth point is that due to the Middle East crisis, we can see cracks in the nuclear non-proliferation treaty, and also we see a rise of AI-led war items. And also we can see low-cost weapons such as Shahed drones being used. So we have many lessons to learn in terms of military.
마지막 포인트는 경제 안보, 그 중에서도 특히 에너지 공급망이 전통적인 군사 안보의 영역과 결합되어서 어떠한 약소국의 그러한 좀 전쟁의 효능감 있는 무기 체계로 이렇게 등장하게 되었다. 그것이 가장 큰 것이 호르무즈 해협에서의 그런 봉쇄에 대해서 우리가 볼 수가 있습니다.
And the last point is that in terms of economic security, we see that traditional military security has emerged as a weapon system with the efficacy of war in any weaker nation. So we see that in the Hormuz Strait blockade and many other examples during the war.
이 중동전에 대한 우리 한국의 그런 외교 안보적인 스탠스는 일단은 다음과 같습니다. 다만 이것은 정부의 공식적인 입장이 아니라 저희 개인적인 생각이라는 점을 밝혀둡니다.
And in terms of Korea's diplomatic and security stance regarding the Middle East war, we can see the following points. I would just like to point out that this is my personal view and it has nothing to do with our government's view.
네, 미국은 한미 동맹처럼 우리에 있어서 아주 필요한, 아주 필수 불가결한 동맹입니다. 그러나 그렇다고 하더라도 직접적인 이 중동전에 있어서의 직접적인 군사 개입은 우리는 좀 지양해야 된다고 생각을 하고 있습니다. 그래서 다만 중동전이 장기화되면서 미국이 우리 한미 동맹에 바라보는 버든 쉐어링이 더욱더 요구가 강해질 것으로 생각이 됩니다만은 한국은 여기에 대해서 외교적인 지원, 그 다음에 해상 안보 협력, 인도주의적인 지원, 이런 부분에 국한해서 지원을 할 것으로 저는 생각하고 있습니다.
The U.S. is a very important ally to the South Korea, and we put great importance in our alliance. However, the Korean government has pulled away from direct involvement in the Middle East war. However, if this war becomes a long-term war, we know that the U.S. will want ROK alliance burden forces to intervene, but the Korean government's stance is that our support for the U.S. in this Middle East war will be limited to diplomatic assistance and maybe maritime security assistance and humanitarian assistance.
이번 중동전이 우리 한반도의 안보에 미치는 영향은 그 파괴 효과는 매우 크다고 생각됩니다. 특히 한미 동맹에 있어서 주축 역할을 하고 있는 주한미군의 전략적 유연성, 즉 미군의 전력 재배치 가능성이 심각한 안보 문제로 부상하고 있습니다.
We know that the Middle East war will have a great effect on our alliances, especially the U.S. forces in Korea and also maybe the redeployment of U.S. assets, military assets on the Korean peninsula. So these are some of the points that the Korean government are very worried about.
한국은 미국과의 동맹에 있어서 이러한 전략적 자율성 확보 노력, 그러니까 미국의 그러한 abandonment와 entrapment, 즉 방기와 연루의 그러한 우려심을 감소시키기 위해서 전략적 자율성을 확보하기 위한 노력을 계속할 예정입니다.
The Korean government will upstep its efforts to secure strategic autonomy among our alliance, and we will be prepared to any abandonment or entrapment of the U.S. in such issues, and this is the direction the Korean government is striving for.
예를 든다면은 지금 이재명 정부 하에서의 전작권 전환의 가속화, 그 다음에 핵 추진 잠수함의 등 첨단 무기 체계의 도입, 그리고 방위산업 촉진 등을 통해서 좀 건강한 한미동맹, 그 다음에 전략적 자율성을 확대하기 위한 노력을 앞으로도 더욱 추진해 나갈 예정입니다.
For example, the Lee Jae-myung government of Korea will deal with issues of upcon transfers and also the high-tech technology on the nuclear-powered submarine issue. Also, in terms of defense issues, we will try to stir our alliance in terms of a healthy way and try not to and build on this alliance together.
잘 아시다시피 현재 우리는 북한의 핵 위협에 직면해 있습니다. 그래서 이번 중동전이 또 북한의 군사 위협에 미치는 파급 효과도 크다고 생각이 됩니다.
As you well know, South Korea encounters nuclear threats from the North Korea. And so we look to this Middle East conflict with a grave concern because North Korea might learn from this war and also try to expand its military competence and capabilities.
비단 핵 위협뿐만 아니라 이번 전쟁에서 북한은 AI와 사이버, 미사일, 특히 저가 드론에 대한 교훈을 많이 군사적 교훈을 많이 습득했을 것으로 생각이 됩니다.
We believe that North Korea has took away a lot of lessons from the Middle East war in terms of AI, cyber issues, and also missiles, but also especially low-cost drones that have been very effective in this conflict.
특히 그 저가형 드론에 대한 그러한 방어 체계에 대한 부분도 지금 한국에서는 심각하게 고민을 하고 있는데 그 수단으로 레이저 방공 체계와 피지컬 AI 드론 대응 체계 등은 아주 그 효율적인 수단으로 검토가 되고 있습니다.
South Korean government is also looking at the implications of the usage of the low-cost drones during the Middle East conflict. And we are focusing on trying to find ways for effective defense systems. Right now, we are looking at laser defense systems and also physical AI drone response systems.
마지막으로 저는 이번 전쟁에서 한국의 방위 산업에 미치는 효과도 컸다고 생각이 됩니다. 특히 그 중동 그 영공을 방위하기 위해서 한국이 수출한 M-샘 같은 경우에는 약 97%의 명중률을 기록한 바가 있어서 그 우수성을 입증한 바가 있습니다.
My last point will be on the defense industry and in Korea, and the Middle East war has great implications for a Korean defense industry. It is to my knowledge that in terms of the Middle East air defense, Korea's LSAMs that were exported to the UAE had 97% attacking rates. So we think this will be a very good focus.
네, 그래서 이번 중동전을 계기로 우리 한국과 UAE 간의 방산 협력의 새로운 기회의 문이 저는 창출됐다고 보고 앞으로도 이러한 방산 협력에 있어서 우리 두 국가 간의 협력이 더욱더 강화되었으면 좋겠다는 생각입니다.
And so I believe that the Middle East crisis has opened a new door for defense industry cooperation between South Korea and UAE. And I hope that both countries, the two countries, can enhance their cooperation in the defense sector in the future.
제가 알기로는 UAE는 중동에서 아주 선도적인, 리더적인 국가의 그러한 위치를 점하고 있고 또한 첨단 그러한 무기 체계들을 도입한 경험이 있다고 생각이 되고요. 반면에 한국은 우수한 제조 능력과 우수한 첨단 기술 이러한 부분들을 가지고 있습니다. 이 두 부분들이 결합이 된다면은 향후에 중동전 이후에 전 세계적으로 글로벌 방산 협력 시장에서 아주 강력한 파트너가 될 수 있다고 생각이 됩니다.
I know that UAE is a leader in the Middle East in terms of high-tech weaponry systems, and with South Korea's manufacturing abilities and advanced technologies, I believe our two countries can cooperate to become a very great partners in the global defense market.
네, 그래서 이번 회의와 이번 또 중동전을 계기로 해서 앞으로 양국과 간에 더욱더 방산 협력이 이루어지기를 기대하면서 제 발표를 마치겠습니다.
I'd like to end on a note wishing that UAE and South Korea can enhance their cooperation in the defense sectors, and we have many opportunities in the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lee. You've mentioned major points. You covered it all, going from the military side to the strategic side. Thank you so much. I think we can take a step further and look more on the economic side, more in depth. So let me bring in Dr. Kim Kyung-suk, head of the Center for Supply Chain Studies at the Institute for National Security Strategy, whose work focuses on global supply chains and economic security. Dr. Kim, from an economic and supply chain perspective, how is South Korea assessing the risk associated with the current crisis?
Thank you. My name is Kyung-soo Kim from INSS. I'm very happy to having me in this meeting. I would like to brief comment on global economic and economic security. As you know, Middle East war is posing a serious threat to the global economy. So I would like to brief comment on 3 points on primary impact on global economy. First is the risk of a global economic challenge. I think Iran threatened to completely blockade the Strait of Hormuz and Red Sea amid its conflict with the United States. It could drive the global economy to the brink of collapse. And second, energy and supply chain crisis. Polarized energy supply chains and surging raw material prices are dampening real economic activity. As a core hub for global oil and gas, the intensification of conflict in the Middle East causes direct supply disruptions. Strait of Hormuz blockade leads to global energy supply chains have been severely hit as the Strait of Hormuz, through which about 20% of the world oil passes has been effectively paralyzed. Surging international oil prices. Brent crude and other major benchmarks surged nearly 40% in the short term following the outbreak of conflict. Some analysts warn prices could soar to $150 to $200 per barrel. And commodities and fertilizers. Just disruption in natural gas supply are reducing fertilizer production, sparking fears of global food prices high. And third, financial and capital market instability. Heightened uncertainty has maximized the risk aversion sentiment in the markets, weakened the investor sentiment. Global stock market volatility has increased, with the Kospi and other indices in energy-dependent countries like South Korea facing significant downward pressure. Interest rates and currency values. Inflationary pressures are delaying interest rate cuts by central banks, while a preference for safe haven assets continued to drive a strong US dollar. Lastly, I would like to specific impact on the South Korean economy. South Korea is particularly vulnerable due to its high reliance on overseas energy, growth and inflation. The OECD lowered South Korea's 2026 growth forecast from 2.1% to 2.7%, while raising its inflation forecast to 2.7%, worsening trade balance. Negative impacts on the trade balance are becoming evident due to increased oil import costs and slowdown in global trade. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kim. It is truly fascinating how these geopolitical developments can quickly translate into economic and logistical pressures. If I could connect this to the regional perspective, I'd like to bring in Mr. Abdelaziz Al-Shahi, researcher and deputy head of the research sector at Trends Research and Advisory, focusing on regional geopolitics and international relations. Abdelaziz, from the Middle East perspective, how do you see countries like South Korea navigating the region during periods of heightened tension?
Thank you, Mariam. First of all, I'd like to express my happiness to join this meeting today along with colleagues from INSS and colleagues from Trends. It's an important question. It's a pleasure, as I said, to join you here today. While much of the discussion, of course, given the title, focuses on South Korea and how South Korea sees the crisis in the Middle East, I'd like to offer a perspective from the UAE and the GCC countries, as your question entails. One that recognizes that in our region, security and economics are inseparable sometimes. Besides here, security does not simply shape trade. Sometimes trade is security. So let me begin with the security dimension because it defines everything that follows. At the center of the crisis lies one of the most strategically vital waterways in the world, the Strait of Hormuz. This narrow passage carries roughly 20%, as Dr. Lee have said, 20% of global oil flow, 20 to 25% of global LNG, 10 to 15% of global urea, which also affects one of the main security pillars in the world, which is food security as well. The increase in prices of fertilizers goes hand in hand with increase of food, which effectively hits one of the main pillars, as I said, of security in a state, which is food security, making it not just a regional asset, but a cornerstone of the global economy. Today, the issue is under direct threat. The strait is under direct threat. Recent developments have shown that Iranian forces, as of today, seizing commercial vessels, firing on ships, and effectively disturbing maritime traffic in the strait. leaving thousands of seafarers stranded and hundreds of vessels unable to move. From UAE and GCC perspective, this is not an abstract geopolitical issue. It is a direct attack on regional stability and global economic order. And let me be very clear here. The Gulf states are not parties in this war. They're not parties to this war, yet they are being targeted by Iranian actions that have included attacks on commercial shipping and threats against GCC territories and important infrastructure as well. Actions that have been widely condemned by international community as violations of international law. More importantly, the attempt to close or control the Strait of Hormuz has no legal basis under international law. Under the universally recognized principles governing international straits, reflected in the United Nations Convention on the Laws of the Sea, the UNCLOS, transit passage cannot be suspended or obstructed. Any attempt to block such waterway constitutes a serious breach of international obligations and threat international peace and security. In other words, what we are witnessing is not simply escalation. It is the use of geography as a tool of coercion, as a tool of terrorist attack or a terrorist economic attack. It is the attempt to hold not only the GCC, but the entire global economy hostage. And this is precisely why over 100 countries through international institutions have condemned these actions and called for immediate restoration of freedom of navigation. So from security studies perspective, this reflects a dangerous shift, and which is the weaponization of critical infrastructure. Energy routes are no longer just economic corridors, they are becoming instruments of strategic pressure. Now, if we move from security to economic consequences, we begin to see how quickly this instability translates into systemic disruption. The GCC-South Korea relationship is built on energy flows, as Dr. Lee have mentioned. South Korea imports around 70% of its crude oil from the Middle East. And the UAE alone exports are worth approximately $12 billion annually, with oil accounting for nearly 80 to 90% of total UAE exports to Korea. This level of concentration creates efficiency, true, but also vulnerability. When the strait is threatened, the entire structure of this relationship is shaken. We are already seeing the consequences. Global energy markets have reacted sharply, with supply disturbance reaching record level. At this one point, over 12 million barrels per day were affected, making one of the largest supply shocks in modern history. So for South Korea, this translates into rising imports costs, inflationary pressure, and industrial strain. And this brings us to the second layer of impact, which is the Korean industry. Korean economy is valued at nearly $684 billion in exports annually. And it is built on manufacturing sectors like the petrochemicals, automobiles, and electronics, while there are other venues that are open, like defense ties, which we are hoping to increase, given the success of the South Korean air defense systems that are combined in the UAE 6-layer defense system, which help intercept the missiles with over 90% of, as our colleagues from the INSS have mentioned. There are other areas that are affected, other than the defense and military industry or military artillery industry. So when energy becomes expensive or uncertain, products costs rise, competitive declines. So take petrochemicals, for example. South Korea is one of the largest importers of naphtha, a key input derived from crude oil. Supply disruptions affect everything from plastics to construction materials. Then consider automobiles, which account roughly for 15% of Korean exports. These are global competitive industries operating on tight margins. Energy volatility directly undermines that position. And the effects are already visible. Korean exports in the Middle East have dropped significantly during the crisis, reflecting it doesn't necessarily mean reduced demand, but it does disrupt logistics and makes uncertainty rise even further. The impact does not stop at South Korea. It returns to us as well, because the UAE not only an energy exporter, but also a major importer of South Korean goods, vehicles, electronics, and industrial machinery, as I mentioned. And at the same time, non-oil trade between the UAE and South Korea has reached approximately $6.6 billion. So spanning from aluminum, petrochemicals, and also re-exports and re-services. All of this depends on stable shipping routes. When maritime security collapses, insurance costs rise, shipping slows, and trade contracts. And as a regional logistic hub, the UAE feels this impact more than most. So what we are witnessing is not simply an economic disruption. It is a security-driven economic shock. And that brings me to what matters most for the UAE and the GCC moving forward. First, most urgently, is the protection of maritime security. The Strait of Hormuz must remain open, not as a political concession, but as a matter of international law, as a global necessity. Second, we must preserve strategic partnership with key economies like South Korea. But this relationship must evolve beyond a narrow energy dependency towards broader economic cooperation. And third, we must recognize that the global system is changing. If energy routes can be threatened, disrupted, or politicalized, then both exporters and importers will accelerate diversification. And this is a long-term risk. Not just temporary disruption, but structural realignment. So let me conclude with this. The current crisis is not simply a regional conflict, it is a test of whether the rules governing global trade and maritime security still hold. So for the UAE and GCC, the message is clear. We cannot accept a reality in which international waterways are weaponized, where neutral states are targeted, and the global economy is placed at risk by unilateral actions. Stability in the Gulf is not optional, it is essential, not just for us, but apparently for the world as well. And preserving the stability requires both firm security responses and deeper economic partnerships, which we hope that the UAE or GCC states with South Korea could achieve. And thank you.
Thank you, Abdulaziz. I totally agree with what you said. What we are seeing here is not an intersection between geopolitics, economic security, and strategic positioning, which makes this moment highly significant. If I could take this to a broader level, let me bring in Mr. Nicholas Lyle, Senior Researcher at Trends Research and Advisory, whose work focuses on global politics and international relations. Nicholas, from a global perspective, do you see the crisis influencing how middle powers like South Korea position themselves diplomatically?
Thank you, Mariam, and indeed, it's lovely to meet our new friends today, Dr. Kim and Dr. Lee. It was also very interesting to hear, particularly Dr. Lee, the key pillars of your talk are very much aligned with the remarks I'd like to make. So that is encouraging, and I think bodes well for the prospects of building mutual understanding about the issues and opportunities moving forward. So to begin with, though, I think it's useful to briefly bring in the context, or highlight the context rather, of the fact that the South Korean and UAE relationship has experienced an undeniable shot of energy as a result of the war. But indeed, this builds on the deepening of the relationship just prior to the war. So during the war, we've seen a very significant increase in defense procurement from the Emirati side, procurement from or of South Korean air defense technology, which has performed admirably during the war. But that increasing defense procurement builds on agreements just preceding the war pertaining to defense co-production between the Emirates and South Korea. So in that context, and indeed given the Korean-focused expertise of our colleagues, and indeed the framing, Marion, that you suggested, what I thought I would contribute today is a framework for delineating the highest priority effects of the war that both the UAE and South Korea are mutually grappling with, and indeed effects that are set, or that rather both countries are set to remain facing going into the future for some time to come. Because by doing this, having this delineation and applying this framework, hopefully we can begin to delineate what are the highest priority and thus the most strategic areas for both parties, both nations, both states, to focus their collaboration on as the bilateral relationship continues to move forward and build on this recent momentum. So let me quickly share my screen in order to make the diagram visible that helps understanding my remarks. And if this isn't showing, please someone do yell out to me.
It's showing.
Okay, great. So in terms of prioritizing the effects of the war, the mutual effects that both South Korea and the Emirates are
we
feeling.
can't see it. We can't see your screen.
No? Okay.
Nope.
But Mariam, it's showing for you, is that correct?
It is showing for me as well. Perhaps like stop sharing and then reshare again. Maybe that will help from our Korean counterpart.
Okay, is it any different now, guys from INSS?
Nope.
Yeah, I'll try once more.
Hmm.
Okay, is that any different now?
From our side, we can't see it. I can't see it.
Me as well.
Yeah, we can't see it. Sorry. I think it's oh, yes, now we can.
Yes? Wonderful, okay.
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
So, in terms of doing that prioritization that I was mentioning, of the effects that both South Korea and the Emirates are mutually feeling and experiencing as a result of the war, a useful framework for doing that is a systems change hierarchy, which is what you can see outlined on the screen here. But first, we need to define the system that we're talking about, and the system in which the effects that both countries are experiencing, those outcomes, those dynamics of the war. And this system, at least as it seems to me, is the US-led liberal international order, which is the order since World War II has been at least aimed to provide security and to provide economic public goods to all those who agree to abide by the system, the rules, and its norms. Now, this order or system has historically been structured around pillars like freedom of navigation, like extended deterrence against potential instigators of conflict through forward deployed US military bases around the world. It involved pillars like predictable dollar-denominated energy markets and pillars like, historically, responsible nuclear non-proliferation norm enforcement. Both the Emirates and South Korea and middle powers in general have built their national security and their national economic strategies around the assumption that this system, this order, would continue functioning more or less as it has since its inception. Now, in any system like the US-led order, there are always 12 different levels or categories of things that constitute the system. And in terms of ascertaining how consequential any effect or change to the system is, that can begin to be understood by understanding at what level of systems change this effect or this change is manifesting at. And as you can see here on the screen, each of these 12 levels have different amounts of significance regarding what level of systems change is occurring. Now, level 12 on the top left of the screen being most consequential, and level 1 on the bottom right being the lowest. Also on the screen, you'll see in these brown boxes, I proposed what I see as the 6 most consequential effects or changes to the system as a result of the war that both South Korea and the Emirates are experiencing and grappling with. And you can see there also on the screen that these effects are organized according to what type or level of systems change they represent, and which is a useful starting point for helping us to begin to establish how consequential these changes are. Now, due to time constraints today, I'll just go through the 3 most consequential effects, but hopefully the fact that the full framework is laid out on the screen can spur some ideas for those watching. Now, in terms of the first effect, you will see on the left-hand side of the screen, which is the institutionalization or the weaponization of the Strait of Hormuz becoming a potentially long-term and ongoing geopolitical transformation within the system. And this is operating at the level of a paradigm shift within the system, level 11. Now, as the various speakers today have already laid out very accurately, the effects of this on both South Korea and the Emirates are well known, have been well discussed, whether that's energy transport, energy trade coming out, whether it's helium coming out to influence South Korean semiconductor production, whether it's the UAE's role, critical pillar of its economy as a transshipment hub. All these effects are very well known. But why this, in my estimation, is the most consequential level of systems change in terms of the shared effects both countries are experiencing is because Iran and the US have fundamentally changed how they view global commons like Hormuz as a tool to pursue their geopolitical aims vis-a-vis the other. Now, the future implications of this are quite clear. There is essentially the genie is out of the bottle in terms of how these actors pursue their aims now. And even if there is a long-term or a ceasefire that holds, looking longer term, the very real risk is that Hormuz could continue to be conceived of and used as a weapon in the future. But there's also a paradigm shift more broadly, perhaps, in the international system that this could put at risk. Already we've seen, if we move geographical context to the Straits of Malacca, over recent weeks, there has been some, let's say, rhetorical jostling between Malaysian officials and Singaporean officials regarding to what extent the ongoing openness of Malacca is an unimpeachable norm versus to what extent it is a result of Malaysian magnanimity and interest in cooperation. So again, I don't want to overstate that or dramatize it. It's nothing by any means serious so far, but at least you're starting to see some rhetorical impacts more broadly in the international system regarding global commons like waterways, water straits, maritime trade straits, as a result of what we've been seeing over the past several weeks in Hormuz. Now, the second effect, just moving down the screen slightly, is the effect of the new realities of the US security umbrella, the historical US security umbrella being exposed. And this is operating at level 10, of systems change relating to the goals of the system or some goals of the system experiencing change. Now, historically, US military bases around the world and that military base system was constituted as a network of extended global deterrence against potential instigators of conflict. But in this instance, in this war, it was the US that was the instigator of the conflict. So in other words, this ongoing war represents a very significant case where US hard power within the US-led international liberal order is not used for legitimate deterrence and is instead used for, let's say, US adventurism. Now, when you consider the case in January of the kidnapping of Maduro from Venezuela by the US, the utilization of US hard power for these adventurist aims rather, seems to be becoming an increasing trend, a goal even. So therefore, this change or effect here relates to an emerging goal level change to the system, the US-led order. And such goal-oriented or goal-level changes are highly consequential because they allude to ongoing trends of behavior in the system. But on top of that, or on top of this potentially changing goal, is the accompanying reality that when the US uses its hard power in this manner, it now doesn't match that application of hard power by ensuring its partners are protected from the consequences. So bringing things to the context of this current war, we've seen that US security assistance to the UAE has been insufficient for UAE air defenses to deal with Iranian attacks. And the Emirates has indeed had to work very hard to source air defense system replenishments from a variety of other countries. On the South Korean side, South Korea has had to contend with, as Dr. Lee alluded to, the US removal of THAAD air defense systems from South Korean territory to redeploy those to the Middle Eastern theatre. The result of this is a decrease in the protection and the security of South Korea at a time when the North Korean nuclear program has been as active as ever. So in other words, both the Emirates and South Korea now face the reality of existing in an international order or system in which the traditional security guarantor of that system wields its hard power in a way that is to the detriment of the Emirates and South Korea's ability to protect themselves. Now, the final effect I'll talk about, effect number 3, again down the bottom of the left-hand side of the screen, pertains to the beginnings of a potential transformation of the defence industrial market. And this operates at level 9 of systems change, which regards changes to the ability of actors within the system to redesign or reorganize elements of the system. Now, as mentioned, the inability of Gulf states, UAE included, to rely solely on US air defense systems has led to a qualitative and quantitative shift in their defense procurement as a result of this war. Perhaps the most well-known example is the Gulf-wide procurement efforts to obtain Ukrainian anti-drone technology. But on a specific UAE South Korea level, we've seen, as I alluded to right at the beginning of my remarks, the significant uptake in procurement of the South Korean Chang'an-2 air defense system during the war, which, as mentioned, has performed to an absolutely stellar level, and that's been very, very well noticed in the Emirates. Now, what that all means is that the inability of the US air defense systems to cope completely with the manner of airborne threats seen in this war, but also the insufficient capacity of US defense manufacturers to fulfill global demand, which indeed is something that looks to be an ongoing trend into the future, means that this shift in defense procurements is something that looks set to expand and prolong post-ceasefire, post-war. Now, these changing supply and demand relationships alluded to here point to potential early signs of the decreased level of US security protection capacity, let's say, in the international order, the system. And this gap instead being filled by members of that system self-organizing to meet the requirements. This seems to me to be a useful place to end my talk today, as it represents an opportunity for the UAE and South Korean relationship moving forward and becoming even more strategic. So on that optimistic note, I'll end here and hand back to Mariam.
Thank you so much, Nicholas. It is definitely interesting to see how regional crises increasingly shape broader geopolitical alignments. And thank you for sharing the diagram. It's definitely great, and it gives us a clearer picture of everything. I'd be interested to hear if any of the panelists would like to respond to anything mentioned, or if you have any different perspective on how South Korea might navigate these evolving dynamics, if anyone has anything to share before we end.
I don't have any questions in this time, but I am very impacted your presentation. I hope to the suggestion one thing. I look forward to seeing yours in the April of this year, so about September or October. We have some more the discussion about this, or the cooperation of South Korea and the UAE. I hope to strengthen the cooperation of two countries and to the institute. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lee. So as we approach the end of our discussion, what today's conversation has shown is that developments in the Middle East are no longer confined to the region itself, but they are shaping how global actors, including South Korea, think and plan and respond across security, economic, and diplomatic dimensions. I would like to thank all of our distinguished speakers for their valuable insights, and thank you all. I'll now pass on to my colleague Badria for the ending remarks.
Ladies and gentlemen, at the conclusion of this session, I would like to extend my sincere thanks and appreciation to all the speakers who enriched this discussion with their in-depth contributions and valuable analysis. I also thank our distinguished audience for their engagement and interest. Today's discussions have clearly shown that the current crisis in the Middle East goes beyond its geographical boundaries and represents a global challenge that requires a multidimensional understanding and balanced responses. They also highlighted the importance of examining the positions of international powers, such as South Korea, to understand how policies are shaped in light and interdependence in energy, economy, and security. What we have reached today confirms that dealing with this crisis requires strengthening international cooperation and adopting flexible approaches that respond to rapid change in the global strategic environment. It also highlights the pivotal role of research and think tank institutions in providing objective insights to support decision makers. In conclusion, we hope this session has contributed to deepening understanding and enriching dialogue on this important issue, and that it constitutes an additional step toward building shared perspectives that contribute to achieving regional and international stability. Thank you all, and we look forward to meeting you at upcoming events.
Very much.
Yes, sir.